Our panel this afternoon consists of our speakers, and they will be considering the question or the subject, the commercial viability of reusable launch vehicles. And this is pretty loose as far as rules. The only thing I would like is maybe we can allocate about 10 minutes to make a statement as to what our positions are on the viability of reusable launch vehicles. Then we could have maybe about a 20-minute discussion, a 10-minute wrap-up, and then allows about 20 minutes for audience question and answer. Okay? So just sort of a general framework. To moderate our panel this afternoon is Garver, who is the Executive Director of the National Space Society, and she will keep these proceedings in order.
A very difficult job. This looks like an unruly bunch. Given he's already outlined the rules, I'll let each of you begin with your 2-minute summaries of the commercial viability of the RLV, but just to put it in context, what I call this is how do you plan to get sick rich off of the RLV? Bill, I guess you can't answer that question because NASA isn't all about getting sick rich, but I know you personally, and I know that that's a personal goal that's not far from one of yours, so maybe you could tell us what you believe the markets are and so forth for the commercial RLV.
I'm happy to sit, but that means you. Okay. First and foremost, it is not my business as a government employee to have any opinion on this subject. It is our job and the program's job to make certain that the technology is available to reduce the cost of launch and to continue to reduce it for as long as it's necessary to get it to whatever level the market finally bottoms at. That is our understanding of our jobs. That is how we have conducted the program. We have worked closely with our industry colleagues to understand what they needed in terms of operating rules, and to the maximal extent possible, we have then instituted those as the rules of this program. In the limit, even including having to invent new procurement system, new procurement rules, cooperative agreements for-profit companies in particular, an invention for which I am given the blank, and for which some of my colleagues I'm sure would love to hang me. Nonetheless, as a mechanism for effectively engaging private sector interests, that particular procurement tool has worked very well. As to the market in general, the only thing I can say is NASA, jointly with industry, did conduct a market analysis a couple of years ago. It's called the Commercial Space Transportation Study. And it did ultimately yield an analysis of the elasticity of demand with respect to price for the space transportation business. The goodness or badness of that study is open to much debate. Either way, it remains the only thing that exists that gives us any idea of how the market might expand as a consequence of reductions in price, which is publicly available. Each of my colleagues have developed their own assessment. I have been privileged to see some of those. Those, however, remain private. I think that's about everything I can say with respect to what the government's understanding of the business is.
Okay, thank you. Let me start by one little piece off with a personal conviction that I had the privilege of working with the Atlas program several years ago, which was our first really commercial operation in the launch vehicle business. We have launched commercial payloads in launch vehicles to a large degree. Under what was then General Dynamics, they had this dream of the commercial launch business, and they learned to their chagrin just how much that can cost and from that, like in the shuttle, we've learned a lot of lessons. There was an old friend of mine who was in the investment business that told me, if anyone ever offers you an opportunity to invest in a pioneering effort, pass it up and wait till the second day. There is unfortunately a lot of wisdom in it. We always find that the pioneering venture is the exciting thing. It's where we have our dreams out in front. And the folks that really clean up those that come along in the second and have the opportunity to not fight all of the wasted battles, but to go focus in with laser-like accuracy on the things that count. Today, our industry is looking at that opportunity. We have the shuttle experience as a real-world teacher of what reusable systems can be, what they shouldn't be, what they should be. We have commercial experience in flying expendable vehicles and competing. We've all made some mistakes. We've all learned some better lessons. And today, the opportunity is there. We have focused, and if you notice in my comments, I focused on what's new in this program, and it isn't technology. Technology is the enabler. But the breakthrough in this program is for the first time, our part of the business is having a chance to take a clean sheet of paper and make this into a business where every bit of the engineering design and it's a really exciting.
Thank you, DK. The nice part about sitting next to DK is I have my picture taken along. A question about commercial viability of the RL comes down to one aspect, and it's low cost. Cost from two aspects: the cost to operate and the cost of acquisition. And as we can drive both of those down, it will attract the market. I think several studies have been done that have shown the elasticity of the market with price. And we feel by getting that dollars per pound, which is the key ingredient, and having an attractive system that will generate the excitement and interest of venture capital. We could show that a commercial RLP is viable. And the phase 2 part of the program, which will run from July 1 through the end of 1999, is to do just that. It's not just to fly the X-33, but it's to demonstrate there is a market out there, there is venture capital out there that will come forward and support such a program. And we think we're on the forefront of a very new and exciting era, one that we've seen take place years ago in the commercial aircraft industry. And we feel that step is here today.
Thank you. Well, I think there's no doubt in my mind that reusables are going to be commercially viable. That really isn't an issue in my mind. The issues in my mind have to do with how to go about it. I think it's clear there are not going to be any significant reductions in launch costs with expendable launch vehicles. Those prices are going to be high and remain high for as long as we have expendables. Just as any way around it, we can reduce the costs a little bit, a few percentage here and there, but no significant cost reductions in reusables in the foreseeable future, in expendables in the foreseeable future. That means access to space is going to be difficult and expensive. So we do need reusables, and the question in my mind is how to go about it, as I said. A logical approach in my mind is to go to the next logical step with current technology, and as I mentioned, it would be a two-stage reusable vehicle. We've developed technology for that kind of vehicle over the past 20 years with the space shuttle. We've invested $20 or $30 billion in it. I can't see at this point investing another $10 or $15 billion in a whole new vehicle when we have the current technology to build a two-stage vehicle, which will, in fact, significantly reduce the cost of access to space. And we can do it within the next 4 or 5 years. And the probability of doing it is very high as compared with the probability of building a operational low-cost SSTO in the next 10 years. I think that is a high-risk venture, high-cost venture. The ultimate economic viability is not clear at this point. It may well turn out to be viable and very economical, but it's just not clear at this point.
Is that it? Let's see, you, DK, mentioned the investing in pioneering ventures is not always a great opportunity. But I think if we stop and think of what's happening right now, is that's what the phase 2 program we're entering into is all about, in that the government is taking on a very entrepreneurial role of helping to buy down the upfront technical risk and operations risk, clear up some of the uncertainties by providing hard evidence not only to the investing community, but to, and maybe more importantly, to the user community. This whole concept of reusable systems indeed is real, and we can go on from there to develop a private business about it. We haven't talked about it, but we should not forget that in the heat of this competition within industry here, that we're really in a competition internationally. And because we are certainly not alone here. The Europeans are marking our moves very, very carefully and laying out a plan. Their strategy right now seems to be second, and to move on rapidly from that. The Japanese are more aggressive in a very methodical way, in that they have a long-term program that is laid out and that they're in the process of executing. It's one that's laid out as a national program that is very well funded, and as I said, the progress is in place, and their goal, and there's no question in their minds that they as a nation are going to go to space and are going to be the leaders in the world in doing that. And their plans from the rocket end of the industries to the construction end of the industry call for an enormous investment in future space. And they well know that all depends on a basic transportation infrastructure being put into place. I think one thing we need to realize and keep stressing is that we're not dealing just with launch vehicles. We need to put a fundamental infrastructure into place the same way that this country expanded with the highways, the waterways, the railways, the airways. The spaceways need to come next. And that is not solely a job of industry. Industry needs to play an important part, but so does the government. And the government is beginning to play a lead role in right now in the RLV program. FAA needs to come along and add to it. And I think there'll be more infrastructure development that has to be in place. Spaceports have to be built and distributed around the country and eventually around the world. So I think there's no question in my mind that you need to be out in front in this pioneering effort, or we'll find that the international language of space travel is not going to be English, it will be French or Japanese if we're not careful. Lastly, in terms of economic viability, it's there. And you look at the broad range of future expansions, and one of the most obvious ones is space tourism. Why space tourism? Because there are a lot of people. The transportation thrives on carrying lots of things. We don't have to produce people; they're already there. They're nicely packaged. and they'll pay you money to go on trips. Tourism in the United States is either the second or first largest industry, and internationally it's a multi-trillion-dollar a year business. So that becomes a great starting point. And you talk about anchor tenancy. An anchor business may very well be built around that tourism industry. So y'all come fly with us.
I think I'll stay down here, so you don't have to keep passing the mic, and because I've always had a life goal of being Sally Jesse or Donahue or something, so I'll just walk around, hand the mic to you. So welcome to my panel on old white guys trying to open the space frontier. Sorry, Bill, you may not associate that remark. I realize you're younger. The National Space Society members really should be gratified by the fact that we have this panel because, as Bill spoke about, he's been coming to every conference for at least 5 years now. I know we received our first briefing on SSTO in 1991, and now that we have this competition going on, and there's actually charts, and you all get to see this and be very proud of the fact that I believe that one of the reasons that we are to this point is because of all of you working so hard to make this program a reality. So with that, I want to open it up. We have plenty of time for questions. Tom, really clear?
Gentlemen, I don't want to make any of you squirm. You cannot speak about your marketing plans too closely, I understand. However, from the hints I've already heard, one of the things that seems to be noted is that they have concentrated on the same market, singular. I believe the gentleman on my left said that. In particular, however, I am interested in finding out, if you can say so, what your companies will be doing to develop the customers that will be coming along. At the moment, I'm told by aerospace accountants that Boeing didn't commit to the 777 until they had 30 aircraft ordered. They didn't lay down their first piece of composite or cut their first metal. Are you going to require that? Number two, if you require customers, do you require them, if not ordered aircraft, or excuse me, ordered spacecraft, then do you require active market activity right now at the time you make your decision between, say, March of '99 and March of, let's say, as late as 2001? And number three, the last question of these three, if you require those people to be active, are your companies going to do anything to get some of these things like space tourism, small light manufacturing, and others moving before you have to make that decision between March of '99 and March of 2001? Thank you.
Okay, we've got all that. Tell us what you can tell us, TK.
Let me see if I can peel that onion without taking a lot of time. Let me twist your question just one little bit to expand the scope. You asked about marketing. In our case, in Lockheed Martin, we had a commercial launch services group that was a marketing team, and we brought in with the merger of Lockheed Martin companies. We now have the international, which includes participation with other firms. So marketing per se is not an unknown thing. I think when we talk about market development, we start expanding the scope. And one of the things that I think is very important in this is what business are we in? When I ran Atlas, my business was providing launch services. In other people's minds, the business was selling launch vehicles. I think as we look forward and you look at this, one of the lessons that most of us have learned is that there's a great debate between a vertically integrated company that goes all the way from building hardware to providing end services and those that contribute to a wide array of companies. I can envision the ones that would best develop tourism, if that happens to be the one you like, or the space power, or any number of these other things that are on the periphery. I think all of us in our mind believe those are realities, we just don't know the time frame. The fastest way to stimulate that is not for large aerospace companies to go around trying to promote space tourism. Let's just use that as an example. But rather to find the people that are in the tourism business and make sure that they have access and exposure to these things. They're the ones that know the kinds of things that sell and grow. They're the things that, like the Japanese Rocket Association that did a study, a survey of Japanese people and extrapolated that tourism. And it turns out to be a very well thought out piece of work. Things that those of us in the aerospace world would not have thought to do. So maybe one of the things that happens is we are a catalyst. We are building things which allow industry to go forward. I, for instance, intend to build a launch vehicle that goes into orbit and comes down. Inside that payload container is magic. And it is imagination of our kids. Some of them will be passenger carrying, some may be tourists, some may be shuttling back and forth between vehicles, others are going to be putting up satellites and different systems. But I'm not sure that our role is to try and be everything to everybody. I think our job is to provide low-cost transportation to space, make it accessible to the world, and let the world's imagination make the explosion.
I think you said it quite eloquently, DK. I agree with you, and that is our company position also. We're developing a transportation system and do not portray ourselves as the experts in either waste disposal or tourism or solar power or what have you. We will provide a low-cost means to make those things a reality. And what does it take to get to the RL decision? Yes, there are specific requirements that we have as a company before we will invest, just like we see the venture world out there will have their requirements. And before we go forth, or any prudent investor will go forth, those requirements have to be met. And it's the goal of this next phase of the program to meet those specific requirements. But we are a transportation company. We are the truck that's bringing the payloads to work.
So I think the answer to your question were yes, yes, and yes. But there are many aspects, and I think a lot of them have been covered. One thing that's not totally clear is whether the aerospace company itself is necessarily the best company to be the operator company. In the same way that aerospace companies don't operate United Airlines or American or JAL anymore. And again, it relates to the fact that those are specialty businesses, and there are people who are good at it, and they get good at it because that's what they're getting dedicated to doing and continually improving their services. Aerospace companies get good at designing things and designing to meet customer specifications. When you put yourself in the position of trying to specify and then turn around and build it, you've almost guaranteed yourself some compromising positions because it's easy to back away when you know how to build it, that if that requirement were relaxed a little bit, it would be a piece of cake. And whereas the guy that's in the business knows that is absolutely the requirement you gotta have, and if you can't make it for me, I'll go find someone else that will. And so this whole thing may develop differently than the way the rocket transportation has grown up, which is, after all, the people who are in the business were the people who happened to have built missiles in the Cold War. And so you're left with this heritage of hardware, and you turned it into a business. As was pointed out, we're now at the clean sheet end of the spectrum now, and starting anew. And we probably need to go back and look hard at just how the business itself is going to be formulated. And I suspect it's going to be a lot different than the way space transportation is put together now.
Another question? Peter?
In 1983, 84, Klaus Heiss, remember Klaus, approached NASA with backing from a large investment house to purchase a shuttle. You remember that as well. And NASA said, no, you cannot buy a space shuttle because we haven't recovered our R&D dollars, and therefore the enterprise isn't fair. I guess the question is to you, Bill, and then the manufacturers, how will the first private ROV get sold? Or how will the first private space tourist go up an ROV? Will it be, as Bill said, with an operator that an ROV is sold to, a space line? And if so, will NASA allow it, and will the manufacturers agree to sell? Or will it be by virtue of one of the primes becoming an operations arm as well?
Two parts. I was a venture capitalist working in the Helmsley building on the other side of Grand Central in 83 and 84, and I took a hard look at that proposal. It was not a large investment bank, it was a boutique out of Princeton, and it was backed by a large American company to the amount of $100,000. And yeah, it punched. It was self-evident that the shuttle was not economic. Even if you could buy one at cost, you couldn't make any money flying it. It simply cost more to operate it than you could charge. And for that reason, we did not invest in that activity. To the larger question of how is it financed, how is it done, from the government's point of view, we don't care. We only care that it not be the government. And there's a very straightforward reason for that. I cannot talk about, but I'm aware of the accurate projections for NASA's budgets. It's going up a cliff, folks. There is no money to build even a $5 billion new vehicle. It's not there. If it gets built, it's going to be privately developed. It's just that simple.
But the question, Bill, is NASA stopped the sale before. It was very clear at that point in the administrator's office, we would not allow a Rockwell to privately sell the shuttle. That was a meeting of the administrator's office. That is clearly not the case going forward?
Absolutely not. In fact, we've had these discussions both internally and with some of our industry partners as they've come up. If the builder of an RLV or builders of RLVs wish to sell units elsewhere, that's fine. Their business. They may have arms control issues with the State Department. There's all kinds of other parts of the government. From NASA's point of view, we don't care.
And the second part of the question, I'm curious from the teams, will it be yourselves or an operator which you sell a vehicle to will take the first phase tourist up?
Well, I suspect we all have perhaps different answers. I'll just tell you that in the phase 2 program that we proposed, we have three legs on our stool. One of them is the X-33 demonstration that gets a lot of attention and focus. The second one is the maturation of the RLV full-scale vehicle into sizing configurations, including the ground testing that goes with it, which gives us the right size vehicle and determination. The exciting part of that stool is the thing called enterprise development. And that is the one that goes out, and one of the biggest chores is to figure out how best to architect a business or a series of businesses. One of the things that we've been playing with is bringing the MBA to schools like Harvard and MIT and some of the other big ones in, to take this on as a case study of really not just the launch vehicle business, but high technology business development in the future. It's an extraordinarily difficult problem. And the way one architects the business has tax implications, it has liability, firewalls that are necessary at times. There's a whole lot of things which need to be played out. And at least the enterprise development lane of our school has a function set aside to do business architectures, to play with the same cost model, to play the different implications of setting up a scheme. I don't know which one will come out, but my guess would be that the Lockheed Martin company or whatever builds this thing is not going to be doing all the other things, but rather it's going to be a large growing thing. And maybe we'll have space lines to take the place of airlines.
The next few years will answer that question. One of the things out there that will help us answer it is the formation that we have just recently of USA, or United Space Alliance, which is becoming the operator of the shuttle. That's going to teach us a lot about a separate operating company, and there'll be a lot of lessons learned there that will be absorbed. And I think by the end of 99, we will have the answer. It isn't quite clear yet, but it's leaning towards a separate operator.
Tagging on a little bit, and I guess part of the excitement is that none of us sitting up here have the foggiest idea really how this whole thing is going to develop. It may be a little apocryphal, but in our own company, Donald Douglas, when they built the DC-3, had an order for 12 of them, and he was delirious because he thought it was a very, very successful program, and had no idea of what it would go on to create. No idea, or could he probably in his wildest imagination think of people using airplanes to pick up packages, fly to one central location, redistribute them, and fly out again the next morning to get next day delivery services and so on. So we're way back in that primitive stage, trying to grasp how this whole business is going to develop. And our models are launching satellites and soon to go build a space station and keep it supplied. But when the real entrepreneurs kick in and come up with, maybe it'll be advertising in space. Who knows what's going to happen and how it'll develop. But it'll probably develop differently than any of us imagine. But I suspect it also will develop very, very fast and will be beyond the capability of any one organization to dominate it and to do it by itself.
Next question, in the back on the aisle.
I come from a location where there are executives who are doing 10, 20-year plans for their business, and they would like to include space development in those plans. But at our location, it's irrelevant unless a vehicle can take off from a site similar to an airport and land at a site similar to an airport and had access to the air control structure to do that, or approval to do that. Which one, and they see it's not necessarily to have an orbital vehicle to reach orbit and provide support for lodging and package transportation. They think suborbital vehicles might do the job quite nicely. Of those of you who are represented up there, can any of you see operations that could really support this type of commercial activity? Support for lodging in orbit, support for transportation from one side of the planet to the other, in 10 years or 20 years at a location other than a ballistic missile range.
I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative, not have everyone answer every question so we get through some more. If anyone else feels compelled to answer, otherwise I'm going to take Bill.
I love rapid transportation, point to point. There are all kinds of mind games you can play with it. Like the trip I made today, I started out, I forget, yesterday in Gifu, Japan, and flew all day to get here. Once we have a DC-1 operating, that's a 45, 50-minute trip, something like that. Think how the world will shrink in doing that, and you're exactly right. It is going to demand and require routine operations out of lots of spaceports that are going to be located around the world. And that will, by itself, develop new businesses, new interrelationships that will occur. We'll do businesses differently. You'll be able to have a business conference in any part of the world and stay within your same mental and sleeping time zone. Complete your business, come back home, and be no the worse for jet lag. So that again is part of how this whole world and new commercial opportunities are going to develop.
Can you see your vehicle operated from airports?
It depends on what you mean by an airport. I think one of the real problems that we all share right now is we operate with rocket engines. Rocket engines get their thrust from ejecting very high velocity gases. When you have a high velocity gas hit a very low or quiescent air, it generates a lot of noise. It's the same problem that jet engines had, and they were very successful in cutting down and quieting the noise. And that may be one of our major technical challenges is how do you quiet these things down so they become a good neighbor and you can bring the spaceports in closer and maybe eventually be able to operate out of airports. But that I think is going to remain a technical challenge for us to do. But having said that, the ability to populate states and countries with strategically located spaceports, that is very feasible. Anyone else want to comment?
Another question. Chuck Lauer in the back.
Yeah, somebody who's spent a fair amount of time thinking about near-term space tourism, there are two things that I've identified as being really critical to developing people and commercial activities in space earlier rather than later. One is being able to have reliable weekly service that you can actually count on. And number two is being able to launch directly to dock, that you can go up, you can hit where you need to hit, preferably softly, and get the people off the vehicle and into the facilities in a matter of hours rather than having to sit in an airline seat for 2 days with your next door neighbor getting sick all over you until you can go up and rendezvous. Are your vehicles looking at that kind of robust capability so that you can get to these commercial markets earlier rather than later?
Okay, Ira, I'm going to give that one to you.
Well, that's always a dream, and I believe as the cost goes down, that dream will become a reality. And I don't see it just bringing people up to a space hotel and dropping them off. I see tourism being flights where you don't achieve orbit. I believe there are people out there who will pay for thrills like that. The whitewater rafting of space. There's a tremendous opportunity in various aspects of tourism. And I think sometimes we're too contained to our thoughts of tourism as we see it today on Earth. I think we have to let our mind wander, and zero gravity opens up a whole new area. And, I myself am excited that that will soon be.
TK, of course, would say, been there, done that, but the rest of us want to get the experience too. Back here.
I just want to go back to what Peter mentioned earlier and what seems to be an underlying concern about the program, which is that since NASA is managing it, the public gets this feeling that this is a NASA project that NASA wants to just do, demonstrate, and then put it away, just as they did with Apollo. And my concern is that there isn't, at the end of the program, something that will tell the public, hey guys, come in and join us and grab whatever you can of this piece. There isn't a Lindbergh transcontinental type of demonstration to show people, look what you can do with this. Is there going to be something like that that will give the public this feeling that we can now grab this for ourselves and purchase as many of them as we can?
I'll give that to TK, but first I do want to mention, as probably a lot of you know, there are other efforts besides the government effort going on, and I think Bill outlined, you know, this is NASA's role because it's their role. You can't blame them for not having other things going on because that's not their place to do it. In fact, you probably know of the X Prize that Peter will be talking about when we're done with this session, I know, next door in the tourism session. So there are other activities besides just the RLB program that I want to mention, but I'll have TK respond into what this program is doing.
One of the things that always have been around national programs, probably all government programs, we have a mental set of what a government program is. And let me assure you from the contractor side, this does not fit any of the templates that we have ever seen.
Not your father's vote.
This is not your father's vote. This is a tough one. And it's tough, and the reason that it's going to go to fruition, I guess I could accuse my NASA friend of being diabolical, but it's effective, whatever it is. What we've gotten ourselves into is a position where NASA has gone the first step to help demonstrate credibility that there is a technology that is effective. Period. End of report. The companies are being asked, encouraged, whatever word you want to use, that says we're supposed to put in, that's real money, and the only hope of recovery, we're not building a program or a vehicle for the government upon which we can bill for fees or anything else. We're making investments of our own returns. The only hope of recovery is phase 3. And so you can rest assured that if we believe it's going to take something to make us believe we can't make a go of this, to stop this course. Because the only way to recover what we put in is to make this a commercially viable adventure.
If I may follow up, in that case, then if one contractor is selected for phase 3, the other two are free to go and push their products and sell them if they wish.
Absolutely.
I should mention, by the way, I've heard from all of them that the companies fully intend to do that, should they not win. Of course, each of them knows they'll be winners, so they don't have to have
Back when the space shuttle was first proposed, it was kind of popular wisdom. The reason space flight was so expensive is, again, getting back to the analogy of the airplane, you're throwing the plane into 90% of the plane into a sub-Atlantic orbit after every flight, and if we can only stop throwing it away, it would be cheaper. Well, the space shuttle is, to first approximation, reusable. Do I get a sense from those of you in the industry that it is now agreed upon that it's not so much the reusability, but the operations that make spaceflight expensive, the fact that it takes thousands of people to get the plane ready for the next flight?
I'll give that to Bill, but I also would like to have Marshall give his opinions on this.
Well, reusability is kind of the first blinding flash of the obvious. If you don't throw something away and reuse it every time, then your costs come down. Like in our Delta costs, we're typically, I think, about 80% of each flight cost is just in hardware that you build up and fly and then throw away each time. So that's fundamental. Where the emphasis on operations comes is that if it still takes 10,000 people to maintain that vehicle and prepare it for a new flight each time, then you really haven't gained a whole lot, because your operating costs start approaching the cost of your vehicle costs. And so you must have both. So fundamental to it is reusability, and I don't care whether it's 1 stage or 15 stages, it has to be reusable. But then it has to be very, very low cost in numbers of people and the time involved in preparing between flights. Because just like an airplane, if it's not flying, it's not making money or offering services. So that's why the emphasis has to be on the operations.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, I agree that we have several problems in reducing costs. One of them is reusability. That certainly is a big step forward just by itself. But in addition to that, we have terms like operability, which means fairly quick turnaround time, automation, which means fairly low standing army. Today we've got something over 10,000 people working on the shuttle. It's only flown 5 to 10 times a year, so there's not enough flights to amortize a lot of the costs. So operability is very important in an operational system. So the keys are not just reusability, but it's reusability, operability, automation, quick turnaround time, things like that. All of that has to come together to make big inroads into low-cost space flight.
A quick comment. You referred to the space shuttle having been intimately involved in the design of the shuttle from the late 60s throughout its whole life. The shuttle was not designed for operability. It's far different than the design that we're imposing, the design requirements that we're imposing upon ourselves today. We do not choose a design solution that is outside the sphere of operability. We're looking at some specific design solutions that address that. One quick example, we have a propulsion test rig that is operating today at Marshall. We're going through instrumented checkouts of the loading of an oxygen system. We demonstrated we could do that in 3/4 of an hour, including troubleshooting. It takes an average shuttle 70 to 80 hours to do that same task. It's those kind of advances that are going to make the operations the key ingredient of feasibility.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to have you comment, it's kind of a follow-up question on the maintenance of the SSMEs or of whichever rocket engines the individual contractors might be using. That seems to be a critical maintenance component of shuttle.
No question it is, and the SSME, as we know it today, is a glorious engine. It's extremely reliable. It's tough to maintain. Not only the actual maintenance of the engine, but the access to it. It takes several hours or days to get in to service and maintain the SSME on the launch pad. We cannot have a quick turnaround with that kind of serviceability. It's out of the question. In the new engine concepts, the RS-2100, which is the RLP engine of our choice, we see a new design aspects, hydrostatic bearings to increase life, so we don't have to go into maintenance or removing an engine each time. Turbo pumps that operate at lower temperatures, significantly lower temperatures. It's these kinds of advances. We designed an engine installation that allows us get to the parts of the engine that has to be checked very rapidly, like opening the shroud of an aircraft engine today. All part of the operability and turnaround time requirements. So it's very critical, and it's far different on the engine that we envision than the SSME that we know today.
Just add a comment to it from our experience on the DCX with the RL-10 engines, which were designed for an expendable upper stage, but have proven out to be highly reliable and they're reusable application. And it's a case where when the DCX flies and lands, the mechanics go out and do a typical flashlight inspection of the thrust chamber, and barring scorches or cracks, put a plug in the base, a little trickle purge, and we inspect the diagnostics from the flight, and based on that, it's ready to go again. And it's remarkably very similar to the way we treat aircraft engines. And so we tell the rocket manufacturers that what we really want out of their engines is not one that lasts 10 flights between maintenance, or 100 or 1,000, but really on-demand maintenance capability is the same that we've achieved in jet engines today. That all goes with increasing reliability and lowering costs. Jet engines, recall, started out the same way. The first operational engines were the ones that the Germans flew, and they had a lifetime of one flight, and they replaced it. And where we are today, they hang out there on that engine until the health management system says it's sick, we'll fix it.
Good. Bill, want to respond before I take one last question?
Just a quick comment. It seems not intuitive, but it appears to be the case that we can go from the kind of technology we're using today in the SSME to systems which are at once lower cost, more reliable, frankly, because they are simpler, and higher performing. It doesn't typically strike one that higher performance can be had with increased reliability and lower cost, but technically it appears to be the case that with respect to the SSME, engines of the future will be of that character. And that just happens to be one of the lucky things that we discovered in the course of this program. Is largely the geostationary orbit. 12,000 pounds in geostationary orbit backs out when you include the upper stage to get you from LEO to GEO to something on the order of 30 or 40,000 pounds in low Earth orbit. There is another market, which is supply of the space station. It looks like a significant market. It turns out when you back things around, the current plans are to carry much larger payloads to the station fairly infrequently, without giving anything away with respect to any of the team's conclusions. It is certainly the case with respect to everyone's announced what their payloads are. It is plain that each has concluded that it is a better deal to carry smaller payloads more often to space station, and that reflects a decision that by sizing things at a certain level, you get both the space station market and the commercial market. And it was on that basis, I think, that things came out to the sizes we're looking at, which are in the, I believe the numbers is of the order of the 40,000 pounds eastward out of the Cape as a typical orbit, 100 nautical miles. Typically, we're looking at around 25,000 pounds to space station, and typically around 12,000 pounds to GEO. And if I've misstated anyone's targets, you're free to speak up.
Thank you very much. It has been a great 3-hour panel, 3 hours of discussion.